Welcome to the Property Management Success Podcast, where we interview leaders in the industry to uncover the secrets to profitability, efficiency, and achieving true freedom, whether it's your time, money, or lifestyle. I'm your host, Tony Klein, and I'm here to help you build a wildly successful property management business. Let's get to it. Welcome back to another episode of the Property Management Success Podcast. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Mike Goldstein with Hubkey Real Estate. Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike, tell our audience a little bit about who you are, how you got into property management, and where your office is located.
Yep, no, absolutely. Yeah. So I got started in the business as a young kid. Long story short, my grandma was able to escape basically being rounded up by the Polish police, made it over to America, eventually made her way to the very southern tip of New Jersey in a town called Wildwood Crest. Bought a small motel when it was able to kind of sustain herself on that, bought a piece of land and built a 46-unit motel. So I grew up in the hospitality industry, right? Call it short-term rentals, whatever you want. It was it was a motel on the beach in a summer town. That was my life. It was incredible. Didn't know anything else. You're kind of surrounded in a little bubble down there, very small community. And unfortunately, they sold it, right? Family businesses are difficult. And, the family, to me, and I see it now, family is more important than anything. So ended up selling the business. I always had that itch for real estate. Went away to college and graduate college. And my grandmom offers to buy me a car. I'm like, I don't want a car. I have no interest. Worst timing ever. She helps me buy a house in August of 2008. First house I see, pulled in full price offer, did no research, anything whatsoever, but she helped me buy my first house. And that was the first time the light bulb really went off that I can build wealth with real estate. I've been addicted ever since. From there, I ended up getting my real estate license in 2011, even though I know a lot of property managers give crap to real estate agents who get in the property management business. I just was managing my own properties. I was able to go out and sell during the day, nights, and weekends, but was able to reinvest in myself and built a little portfolio for myself. Got my broker's license in 2018. And then late 2021, I opened my own brokerage called Hubkey Real Estate in downtown Philadelphia. Philly is a small city of neighborhoods. I'm in a neighborhood right now called Fishtown, which is awesome. We manage 110 doors focused on downtown Philadelphia. Try to keep the units a little bit higher end. It doesn't always work out perfectly that way. But I'm a big believer in quality over quantity. And that's a lot of what I talk to my potential clients about. Is the goal is not to grow huge. I love a real estate guy in the industry. His name's Chad Carson, and he wrote a book, Small But Mighty, and it really just exemplified everything of how I like to look at what I build for myself and my family.
Tell me a little bit about, there's a few things that I was a few reasons why I was excited to have you on. The first is you specialize in that downtown market. The second is the size of your portfolio. The third is the fact that you got in first as an investor, then a real estate agent, and then in property management. And we see there's generally two ways that people get into property management. They either are a real estate broker, they're looking for a way to expand the ability to bring in income, or they're a real estate investor that says, I can't find anybody that can manage my properties as well as I can. And so they start a property management business. You sort of went through both of those paths. You started as a real estate investor. How many doors did you have before you decided, hey, look, I'm going to start doing third-party management?
Yeah, and I'm still there today. I'm at 20 units, all in a little concentrated pocket of Philadelphia. And I got there, I used to basically have an assistant who would help me with my real estate sales things and manage my own properties. And when my sales business grew too big, I went out and looked for third-party managers. And I just couldn't find anything that I liked. So I just kept the assistant and kept trucking on. From there, I got into the brokerage business. I worked for someone who's been number one in the Philadelphia market for 35 years, and he had the opportunity to buy a franchise. And we turned that around, and that kind of opened my eyes to everything that happens on the back end of a brokerage that nobody really talks about and how hard it really is. But someone said something to me one day that stuck with me. It was early in my real estate sales career, and you're only as good as your last deal. So that was kind of the switch that went on that propelled my real estate investing career. And then how do I blend the real estate investing piece with actually building a business and not just having a job as a real estate agent?
I think it's there's a similar saying that we used to float around. It's at the first of the month as a real estate broker, at the first of the month you're unemployed again until you get that next deal under contract, right?
Yeah.
And so the nice thing about property management, as we all know, if we're listening to the show, is that recurring income. It's generating that income month over month from those contracts, those management agreements. And it's not a lot of money though when you first get one contract or two contracts. It's you're stacking nickels to try to make a dollar, and even that is hard to earn an income on. So did you immediately switch over from brokerage to property management? Was it sort of, I sold a few investment doors and they needed management, so I did it? I'm curious about the intent of
Yeah.
the switch.
I would say it was a slow play. I like to do my best to lead with revenue. So, and to this day, I still represent builders and developers to sell their products. So I tried doing it while I was still at my old brokerage, and I just ran into some hurdles with the PA real estate law in Pennsylvania, and unfortunately had to leave that brokerage to go open up my own. I don't represent any buyers. That's just not a good use of my time. But it was a slow accumulation of, hey, can I build out the systems to manage properties? It took obviously longer than what I thought it was going to take because it's a lot harder than anybody likes to tell you. But I just limit the amount of sales deals that I do, and it's hard because that quick hit of five figures is really, really hard to turn down. But I'm finally at a point now where the snowball has picked up on the property management side, where I can even be more selective of what I do representing sellers, which is still a big part of my business.
Tell me about, you mentioned something that piques my attention. You mentioned that people don't talk about how hard it is to get started. And I know we have people in the audience that are listening that are of all different sizes, various size companies. Some of them are in that multiple thousands of doors. Some of them are just getting started. What is some of that stuff that you go through when you're starting up a property management company that you find out only after you've kind of jumped in?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I don't know the term for this, but it's the over softwareification. I don't think that's a word, but everyone tries to sell every piece of software in the industry to like automate or make the next thing easier. But if you don't have your policies and procedures already laid out beforehand, it turns into a nightmare. And that's exactly what happened to me. I got I got sold too early on all the shiny, flashy things in the industry, and I essentially built a roof before I had a foundation. And I had to tear it down, and that rebuilding process still isn't done today. I'm less than a month away from what I'm calling D-Day, but I just think nobody wants to slow down, especially, and this is why realtors get a bad, or real estate agents kind of get a bad rap, right? Because they just want to go out and sell 25 contracts next month without really thinking about how are you going to explain to another person other than yourself how to actually execute all of these things. And that's the main thing that got me jammed up.
How would, if you were to go back and do it again and start over, or if you were to advise somebody on getting ramped up, getting started, what would you do differently? How would you start out differently?
I would start with just my 20 units, and I would pretend that I'm an owner client, not the owner of the company, because I didn't realize the gap in communication, relaying everything that I do just in my head naturally to a third party. So I probably would have started sooner before I actually took clients on of just treating myself as a third party investor.
I like that. One of the things I got into the real estate and property management business back in the year 2000. So I've been in it for a long time. I've seen a lot of technology change. I've seen a lot of standards and expectations change. And I remember when I would first work with clients, I would tell them, if you hear from me, if I call you, pick up the phone because it's bad news and we got to talk. You are going to grant me all the rights and authority I need to manage this property on your behalf. And so I'm going to do that. But if there comes a time where there is a decision that needs to be made, money that's spent that's above my authorization limit, we need to chat. And for a long time, my business ran fine like that. But what wound up happening is I would have clients that would terminate with me because they would say, well, I've been paying you for 2 years and it just seems like it's an extra expense because everything just goes so smooth. Well, it goes so smooth because I'm juggling, fire bombs in the background for them. But the communication, I think, is a big part of the service we deliver. Then the back end is irrelevant until they know about it up front.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something we're going through now, and finding checkpoints to have happy conversations with them to tell them when something went well is definitely a place that we're focused on.
Yeah, you and I have spent some time talking about what we term the life cycle of property management, where we have the four categories and the five phases of the life cycle, and being able to identify those touch points during those life cycle phases, I think makes it easier to sort of preemptively or at least proactively know when you're going to communicate those touch points, when to ask for the reviews, when to be a little bit more sensitive with the communication when they've got a vacancy, things like that.
Yeah, where the biggest jump in my business has been making the right hires, right? Hiring that property manager that has the softer candor than I do myself to talk and negotiate with those tenants, right? During maintenance, every maintenance issue is a emergency, but like stopping and really thinking about how we're communicating with each one, whether it's a client, resident, or vendor has been huge. And the framework that you've provided for us has just exponentially made our company grow. You can't even put a price tag on it.
Well, I appreciate that feedback. Let's dive in a little bit to that framework. Not specifically the framework in the documentation and all of that, but you are at a size right now, a portfolio size, where with the framework, with having somebody work for you, you now have the ability to open up what's possible because it's under that 100 doors, 150 doors. It's basically you being the brains of the outfit. And then maybe you hire an assistant that does what you say. And as you get to that 100, 150 doors, it has to start changing or you start burning out. It's just too much. And you can't just say, I have an assistant, but I can't tell them what to do because I'm so busy doing what needs to be done that the assistant is just sitting there waiting for stuff to do. What's the plan moving forward now that you've got this solid framework? You've got somebody else on your team that's able to help you move this thing forward. What's the future look like over the next, say, 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's an upgrade of talent. I started with remote team members, but I found they've only can get you to a certain level. So yesterday, right, I just put up a new job description. I'm sorry. I hope my current remote team member doesn't watch this, but I mean, it's just that's business, right? We need to upgrade the level of talent to critically think through issues. So I can only do so much, right? I can only record so many looms a day to put in our database to explain things. I need actual thinkers. So I'm a huge believer in people. And up until yesterday, I've always led with revenue to hire. But I had a breakthrough conversations with one of my good friends, another investor, owns a property management company as well, and he pushed me over the edge to go invest in the business, just like I would invest in another property. I built this business on sheer broker referrals. I've done little to no sales whatsoever and gotten to where I am in 2 years. So I've proved the concept. I had to slow it down a little bit because I got out ahead of my skis, but I'm at a really good place now where the business is under control. I'm not burnt out. I'm spending time with my family on nights and weekends. So now it's all right, I have the confidence to go invest in people. That's really what it looks like. And it's continue to what I call just trim the fat, right? And where we just did it last month for the first time, we let somebody go because they just really didn't follow. They didn't meet our criteria. And I finally felt confident to have that conversation and let them go.
Mike, we talk a lot about building a championship team. You've heard me say that over and over, and part of that championship team is we have a championship formula that we walk through, and the first one is your game plan, which is the mission, vision, core values, target client profile, income and revenue streams. Then we move on to the policies. We've already sort of touched on the importance of documenting your policies before you start creating your processes. The policy is what we do and why we do it. The process is how we do it. But that gets a lot of attention. The next couple of steps, I think people tend to skip over, which is defining the positions that you need on the team and getting really clear about the roles and responsibilities. And then once you have that, now you go and you say, okay, now that I have this position defined, who's the player I need to recruit to fill that? And I think that's, you've experienced that now with the remote team members. And I'm not saying that all remote team members are bad and that all local people are better, but what you realized was you had somebody that you were playing in a position that was not the right player to play that position. And I think recognizing that once you start top leveling, every person that we add to the team needs to raise the standards and the quality of the team. I think once that clicks and you start to see that in action, you start to see that, wow, I'm able to do a lot more now than I was before because I was having to handhold so much before with the other team member. I think it's just really important to set those standards and then hold people accountable. And if they're not cutting it, just like on a professional sports team, nothing personal, but I think it's time you get traded.
Yeah, the my whole philosophy has been kind of re-engineered around that to get to exactly what you're talking about. And you can see it comes with more pressure for me, right? Of holding people accountable, like just being better at candor, not just I want everybody to love me and like me. And it makes some people uncomfortable, but they're going to self-select their way out. And that's okay.
Yeah. So you're growing the portfolio and you are doing it in a specialized way. You mentioned quality over quantity and staying focused. Tell me a little bit about the specialty that you have in the marketplace working in downtown Philly.
Yeah, so if you look at Philadelphia, City Hall is essentially the center of the city. Ben Franklin designed it. And as you go out with a radius, if you think of it on a scale from A neighborhoods all the way down to F neighborhoods, the further you get out from Center City, the worse the neighborhoods get. The lowest I'll go is a C neighborhood, and that takes you about 2 miles each way, 2 mile radius from Center City. So luckily, downtown is obviously dense, and I've made it a point to stay in contact and add value to those real estate agents who do a lot of business in those areas. So I go out and do a presentation called How to Lure to Land in Philadelphia that I put on in front of teams. And it essentially arms them with the tools to sell more homes to real estate investors. From there, right, it's just the trickle effect of, the company's name is Hubkey. I look at that as the hub of the wheel, right? And the spokes are those real estate agents. There are horror stories about property managers all over the country. Most I don't know about, but there's a bunch in Philadelphia. I spoke to one woman literally yesterday with a property in an A plus neighborhood. Her property manager has not sent her a 1099. It's March 13th today. She doesn't get a monthly P&L. She just did a $5,600 turnover and has no bills and no idea what it was for. So unfortunately, the bar is low in Philadelphia for me to come in and be selective about, those pieces of business that I get to pick up. So it's really just, it actually the podcast that you had the other day with the title agent from Denver, right? How do you add value into other people's lives? I've been finding ways to do that my whole life. And it's something I just genuinely enjoy doing. and I get rewarded tenfold for it.
I just this morning launched an episode where we talk about that, where we talk about gaining more by giving. I really believe in the philosophy that you can't outgive. The more you lean into giving to other people, the more it just comes back, and it's that abundance mentality versus the scarcity mentality, and that's hard for some people to adapt because the more you give, the more you're at risk of being taken advantage of. But I think that that's the right philosophy to live life by.
Yeah, no, it's hit home, like I said, tenfold. And the guy I worked for before, Mike McCann, he's been the number one agent downtown Philadelphia, 35 years. The guy gives more back to the real estate agent community than anybody that I've ever seen, and it comes back to him tenfold. So it's your reputation precedes you, and that's just super super important to me.
So with working in downtown Philly, I want to close out a couple of things with that. Are you doing a lot of work with HOAs or what's what's the
So
situation with
no,
that?
I've turned down probably 100 units of HOA business altogether. There's it's a race to the bottom in the HOA management business in Philadelphia. People get the business and then they provide awful service. It's on my 3 to 5 year radar, but right now I don't touch it because I can't compete. I can't provide the service.
So there's two ways to work with HOAs. The first one is to do HOA management, which that sounds like that's what you're talking about. You're not managing HOAs. But the other is managing properties, investment properties inside of an HOA
Um,
community.
yes.
Are you doing any of that?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Our nicest property is in an 8 unit boutique condo building. There's been two tenants in there. They rented from $20,000 to $25,000 a month, right? So that property needs an extra level of service. And then we have units that are in buildings with 500 units as well. And it's making nice with the building manager is my first priority because I've had experiences where they can make your life hell if they want to.
I hear people talk about managing properties in an HOA community and they just say, you know what, it's not worth it. The HOAs are too difficult. And while I do agree that they have some, I won't say unlimited control over your business, but they do have additional control over the way you're able to do business. But one of the ways I found when we had our brokerage in downtown Denver was they're gatekeepers. So you either get on the inside and they give you a key or you stay on the outside. And so I realized if I'm going to be doing business in this marketplace, I definitely need to get on the inside. And so we came up with a lot of different ways that because they have the same desire we do. They want to have good people in good homes and be good residents. And whether they're owners or tenants, they have the same desire. They put a little bit extra scrutiny on the tenant side, but they don't want a bunch of problems in their community. And so we leaned into that's the same approach we have. How can we work together? And it took a little while, but I think if you can create those relationships, it's it's an advantage because now they're going to refer your company out versus some of the other companies that have problems when the owners ultimately call and say, "Who do you recommend for property management in this building?"
Yeah, no, it's actually great. You got my mind spinning. I'm trying to hold back a little bit here, but yeah, it makes a ton of sense to go and do a little extra for them because unfortunately, I never really thought what a source of business they could be for those
Well,
bigger units.
I don't know if this is crossing any legal boundaries or not. I didn't look at it from that standpoint, but one of the things we used to do around the holidays, you get to know the people that are working the front desk, the door, the building manager, and every holiday we would ask for a list of the building staff from the building manager, and we would go and make sure that we met each one of them with no other purpose other than just to check in, tell them happy holidays, and give them an envelope with $100 in it. And so for a few $1,000 in the buildings we managed at $100 a pop, that bought us thousands and thousands of dollars of goodwill where they would allow our contractors to, they would have a contractor say, you got to be out of the building You got to be wrapped up with your work by 4:30. You have to be out by 5. We'd have deals where we were turning properties and they would allow us to stay until 6 or 7 if they were painting and not making noise or something like that. So, um, yeah, we went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I know figuring out that HOA key, I think, is if you can figure that out, it definitely makes your life easier if you're working in those communities.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about you mentioned at some point you over softwareified or softwareification or
I
something.
made up a word, yes.
Yeah, I like that. I made up one yesterday, I think. I'm still undecided if it was an actual word or not. But let's talk about some of the dangers of growing a property management business when you don't know what you don't know and you get in and everything looks like the easy button when somebody's trying to sell you something. And, I'm not looking for you to throw anybody under the bus or anything like that. If you want to share something, feel free to share that. But at the same time, how do we avoid, as entrepreneurs, we're always looking for how do we advance? How do we move the needle as far as possible with as little effort as possible? And I think there are a lot of people that have figured out, even us as property managers, we're trying to communicate that we're the easy button for the landlord. Don't do it yourself. Hire us. We're the easy button. So, how do we avoid making mistakes with pressing the wrong button and jumping in with the wrong solutions?
Yeah, to me, and I liken it to when I started my real estate business, I don't think you can figure out the right way until you fall on your face and completely fail. And that, last year around this time, I was a little bit in that place of, man, how do I get myself out of here? And going back and looking at what I was doing was using software to cover up my inability to critically think through conditional logic is exactly what it came down to. So we hired, a consultant middle of last year, and we didn't have a great run with them. But there's multiple people in the organization, and we just got in front of someone else in the organization, and the light bulb just went off. And what it came down to is don't put anything in any automation software. For me, this is just what the light bulb that went off for us is whiteboard the hell out of your process, fill in the gaps. And for us, it didn't make sense until we built it in a spreadsheet with drop down boxes and check boxes, super simple. So we had stuff running in software because we tried to get in too early, but literally had to break that process and stop it and move back to a spreadsheet. It was essentially the saying of, take one step backwards to take 3 steps forward. So it's the whiteboard to writing out the details to getting it in the spreadsheet and tying that to what is the policy around it so that the people can critically think and not have to ask me for every single thing. So we stopped using Lead Simple, went backwards so that now, all right, we're committed. We're ready to launch April 7th is what I call our D Day, right? Of everything in there. And really, it had to be blown up. Like everything we worked on needed to be blown up.
I think you touched on something, and if people were listening too fast, they may have missed it. And it's something that you and I have talked a lot about. There's something that I sort of preach. A process only exists because a policy triggered it. And we can create processes in a software or on a checklist, paper checklist, spreadsheet, whatever, that as long as everything flows exactly the way it's supposed to, we can have box checkers. Like just check the box that you did the thing. But what happens is in this business, very rarely does an entire day go by where everything goes as it's supposed to. And so at the point where it falls out of that common 80%, what do we do? And that's where we need to focus on those policies. The policy, again, is what we do and why we do it. The process is how we do it. And so if we have teams that can do that critical thinking, we need to first have what our policies are. Then we give them a tool to make it more efficient or effective to uphold or adhere to that policy. And I think a lot of people, when they're looking for that easy button, they said, well, I'll just hire a company, or I'll work with some software where I just put it all in. I think I do a brain dump of here's what I think we should do step by step. But very rarely does business go for a full day where everything goes exactly step by step for every single process. And so I think it's smart that you took it out of the software, documented it so that it is step by step on written paper in Google Doc, Google Sheet, whatever, and then said, okay, this is the flow that I want. Now, how can I build this out to allow us to build in that critical thinking at those critical spots?
Yeah, and without like the whiteboard was just revolutionary for me instead of putting it on a Google Doc or anything because we could then document on the side in real time of what policies impact these steps here. So it was kind of like they made a baby and out came this beautiful product that is, we see it already with the wheels in motion going to where, getting to my vision of how I want the company to run. But it was, we've had some conversations. It was very, very difficult to get to where I am today. And it by no means is anything perfect or ready to go. It's, do we get, I preach it to the team all the time. Did we get 1% better today? And that's what we focus on.
Yeah, it's that the incremental progress over time. We don't need to make incredible leaps every day. We just need to continue to tweak and improve a little bit at a time. So the company size you are, there's a lot of talk in the industry about EOS and scorecards and meetings frequency and all of the stuff that as you grow becomes more important. Are you doing any of that at your portfolio size?
So, speaking of making babies, I have made a baby between essentially EOS and getting things done because what I've found is the rigidity of like that person's exact system, just everything doesn't work for me. So, I've been able to pick and choose, like, I take the L10 meeting from EOS and I apply that to our weekly team meeting and our leadership meeting. So, I've used that across the board. It's been very helpful. Helped me EOS also with the mission, vision, values. That exercise really, really helped me. And I even brought in, I did some learning on a system called Pinnacle, which basically two EOS guys from the beginning broke off and started Pinnacle. It's essentially the same exact thing, just said in a different way. And that made it click for me. So yes, it's a blend of EOS and getting things done is how I manage things. I try to instill it in my team, right? The biggest thing with getting things done, the biggest breakthrough that we had is understanding your brain is not meant to hold things. So whenever you have a thought, you need to get it into what they call an inbox. And you can have as many inboxes as you want, but as few as necessary. And that has been a game changer for me. And my team is starting to implement and see how well it works because, like you said, we're putting out fireballs all day. How do we make it so easy to get things out of your brain?
As you move forward with the company, what's your plan for your role in the company?
Yeah, so I am in the middle of listening to Buy Back Your Time, probably for the eighth or ninth time as it stands
With
today.
Martell?
Yep. Yeah, incredible. Every time I listen to it, I hear something new in there, and that's why I just keep listening to it. I want to have my goal is to be irrelevant in the company. I think it's going to take me another 4 or 5 years to get there. And, the goal is not to grow to 1,000 units under management. I am focused on getting this stood up to about 400 to 500 units, continuing to trim the fat. But my goal in life is that my kids, the 3 and 5 year old girls, they want to hang out with me when we're old. So every day I am very cognizant of how do I not get sucked in to just having a job and make time for them. So I want to be close to irrelevant in the company in 5 years and be
We
able to spend time with my family.
Around here, we talk a lot about the reticular activating system and RAS. What makes it through your filter? Because your brain receives millions of messages a day, probably billions. I haven't done the math, but it's like 11 million per second of points of information. But your brain can only process or retain, even briefly, like 40 to 50 of those. And so, what you retain is things that your brain has already determined is important to you. And one of the things that has made it through my filter lately is the speed in business. It's all about the speed of execution. And I'm sure that this message has been out there for years. It's just that's one of the things recently that's become important to me. So how can we speed things up? I'm curious about that 5 year time frame for you. What is that dependent on? Why is it going to take 5 years and not one? What's the reasons for that?
I like to underpromise and overdeliver for a lot of things that I do. So I think that's definitely part of it. And yes, I go back and ask myself, am I selling myself short with 400 units with 5 years out from being irrelevant? It's a great question. It's people, right? I want to be able to lead with revenue. I'm about to, for the first time, not really lead with revenue with this person, but I'm ready to make that investment. But I mean, it's just how many people can I hire to run this thing efficiently and not be overstaffed is the balance that, as you know, as a small business with not a ton of units, is it's so important to make that right hire, because that a wrong hire can set me back more than it helps me. So I don't know if exactly I answered your question there, but I would love for it to happen sooner than 5 years. But I don't want to also be unrealistic with myself and sacrifice time outside of work to get there.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that as I got older, I when I was younger, I was the super big control freak, wanted to dominate the market for the sake of dominating the market, had nothing to do with money. I just wanted to win. And so we were doing stupid things where we would reduce our fees to the point where we were basically paying to manage the property, but I didn't want anybody else to have a unit in my marketplace. And we were just doing stupid stuff like that. And as I've matured, I've realized, um, through age and making mistakes, that it's not all about the company size. It's not all about total revenue. It's about what do I take home at the end of the day, and what does that do for me and my lifestyle that I want to live, because you can make more money, you can't make more time. So when I work with clients, we spend some time talking about what's this all for? Why are we, what's the goal in the business? What are we growing the business for? And it's amazing how many people say, well, I just want to get to 500 doors, or I want to get to 1,000 doors. And you start digging in why, and there's no reason why. It's just the number they've heard, and they think that, well, if I'm struggling at 100 doors and I'm struggling at 200 doors, I could grow to 500 and solve that issue. Well, you just have different issues, you just have different problems. And so it's really digging into, what do I want this business to do for me in my life? And now let's start figuring that piece out so that everything we do in the business stacks on top of what we want, so that we can build that lifestyle, so we can step away from it and not feel a sense of loss, that we've lost our identity when we hire somebody in to do some of the things that we've been doing for the last 5 years and gave us some level of importance or self-importance.
Yeah, I don't know how to solve this, but I felt so inferior my first couple conferences going to, because the first question out of everyone's mouth is, how many doors do you manage? And then that dictates how much energy they give back to you in the conversation. I wonder if that's the question you ask people. Not you specifically, but people ask, like, what do you want this business to do for you, instead of, oh, how many doors do you manage?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Another way to frame that is, how many hours do you work?
Yep.
You know, if you're running 1,000 doors, but you're working 80 hours a week, I do not want to be you. I don't care how much money you're putting in your pocket.
Yep. Yeah,
And if
that's
you're running 100 doors and working 10 hours a week, I would rather be you. So,
Yeah, 100%. And that's where I fall. And that's, I've kind of defected from the real estate community in Philadelphia, because I can't, that energy is just not where I want to be.
Okay, I want to circle back to something you said, and then we can start to kind of wrap up. But you had mentioned that you're doing these presentations. You get a lot of business from realtor referrals. What are you seeing being successful with gathering realtor referrals or other types of referrals? What do you see is working? Because the market is shifting. It's not the same sales market that we had. We have agents that were buyers agents that were used to being able to just count on a commission. Now they're having to negotiate who's going to pay me. Just a big shakeup in the marketplace. Are you still seeing realtor referrals being a big source of leads for you? Are there other sources? If somebody is trying to grow, what insight do you have for them?
Yeah, so realtor referrals have been 90% of my leads, and it's twofold. One thing in the agreement that I do, it causes a little bit of chaos sometimes, is I have a refer back guarantee. So when that property owner wants to go sell or buy another property, I'm steering them back to their agent that sent me. Now, I also let agents list the property for rent if they refer it to me for the first time. I control the application process and the leasing process, but I never want to take money out of people's pockets because they refer me business. So that's hit home, number one. And then number two, there's a big discourse in Philadelphia about how, uh, where on the spectrum do you land from tenants versus landlords? And I think Philadelphia is playing some catch up from just years of tenant abuse that they've taken, and they're really starting to stick up for tenants, which I think is really needed because tenants have just been taken advantage of for so long. So what that leads to is Philadelphia increasing how they actually enforce the laws they've had in place. They've always had these things in place, but now are actually starting to enforce them. So I'm able to provide value to the agents to then bring it back to their clients to say, hey, if you don't have a rental license, there's a website out there for tenants in Philadelphia that tells them they don't need to pay rent and you can't evict them. And by the way, they can go look for your rental license. It's public information on the internet. So tenants are getting more keen to it. Those stories are spreading, and just the importance of the actual regulations to do it the right way in Philadelphia have been huge for me, staying on top of that and then making it bite-sized information for them to pass along to their clients.
You mentioned that you allow somebody turns over a referral to you as management. You mentioned, and I've never heard anybody else doing this, but you mentioned you let them list it for lease for the first time as sort of a, I don't know, parting gift to them to say, like, you can take this lease listing commission. I'm curious about how's that work with the landlord? Who do they communicate with? Do they communicate with the leasing agent that works for the other brokerage? Do they communicate with you? It seems like a good idea from building goodwill with the referral agent or referrer, but I could see where that causes a little bit of confusion and authority down the road with, well, no, you've hired me as the expert in leasing and property management.
Yeah. So if that happens, they communicate with their listing agent up until the application point. So that agent's responsible. We go in and we'll give them a list of the make ready and still help them make it, ready for the next tenant. But they communicate with that listing agent up until there's an application. So we take over and essentially work for free to screen the tenant and write the lease. And then that's where we take over and they depart. And we do it a ton. We've had one issue with the other agent jumping back in and negotiating the renewal. I never communicated like, hey, we have the renewal. Every other agent has just assumed it. But now we know, right? There's a policy of something that we need to implement of like, hey, we'll handle the renewal, like
Yeah, yeah, it's a
stay to the
one-time
side. But
deal just on the way in, not continuous.
yeah, it really hasn't been a problem. Everyone I tell it to that's been in the industry for a while tells me I'm an idiot and that I'm crazy for doing that. But it's a source of business that, you know, and then I'll lease the place when it comes up for lease next time and no problem. But it's kind of like their parting referral fee in a sense, which I'll pay anyway. But yeah, really haven't had any issues.
Well, Mike, it's been a pleasure having you on. It's been fun to get to know you over the last couple of years here, and it's been fun to kind of watch your growth and transition as you went from operating a business that was.
You can say it. Don't hold back on me.
Well, it was in a state of chaos and at some level, right? And all businesses are, so I'm not trying to throw shots, but it's been fun to watch you stack the pieces in the right order as you're building out the business now. And I can see that future that you're talking about where you are able to walk away in 5 years and have somebody else running the business for you and not having to be the person that holds it all together. So I appreciate you letting me have that insight into the business, and I appreciate you being on with us today. Is there anything that I should have asked or that you want to talk about as we close out?
No, I think we hit it all pretty well. I wish we don't have time to really dive into it. I wish there was better resources for brand new property managers, and that's in the back of my brain. I can only give away so much of my time, but I just wish there was something out there for new property managers with no hidden agendas.
Yep. All right, Mike. Thanks for hopping on. It was great seeing you, and we'll connect again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks for tuning in to the Property Management Success Podcast. We'll be back with another value-packed episode to help you level up your property management game. If you've got something valuable out of today's episode, please share it with a friend or colleague, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so you never miss out on future insights and strategies and tactics. Until next time, here's to your success.